And today's film starts in 1974, where Amelie Poulain was born to Raphael and Amandine Poulain in the northern suburbs of Paris. Amelie's father, Raphael, is a doctor, and he's a very cold and distant person who withholds any form of affection. And he never really makes any physical contact with his daughter except for a monthly medical checkup. Her mother, Amandine, is a school teacher, and she's a very anxious and nervous person, and both her parents are abnormal in their own way. At the age of 6, Amelie was misdiagnosed with a serious heart defect, but in reality, her father never hugs or kisses her, and when he does his medical checkups, it causes her heart to beat faster. And as a result of all this, she had to be homeschooled by her mother. She is given no mental stimulation from her parents to cope with the isolation and loneliness of being homeschooled, as she's also isolated from other children, and so Amelie developed this overactive imagination to keep herself entertained. One day, she was taken to Notre Dame by her mother to pray for her baby brother, and on their way out, a woman who was trying to off herself jumps from the building and lands directly on her mom, and Amelie's mother dies instantly. Following her mom's death, her father withdraws more from society and becomes deeply depressed, and Amelie receives even less parental affection. At the age of 18, she moves to her own apartment and takes up a job as a waitress at a cafe in Montmartre. Amelie leads a very quiet life, and she never found any satisfaction in her romantic relationships. But instead, she takes up pleasure in the little things in life, like plunging her hand deep into a sack of grain or skipping stone by the water. And on Saturdays, she visits her father. Amelie is unusual because she was so sheltered as a child, and she made up imaginary friends in circumstances which resulted in her developing a fantastical and mischievous personality. On August 31st, 1997, Amelie drops her perfume cap out of shock as she watches the news reports of Princess Diana's death. The perfume cap hits a tile which opens, and in the hollow space between the tile was a tiny box. Inside was pictures, toys, and mementos from decades before. Amelie plans to return this box to its owner, and she promises herself that if he's touched by the gesture, she will dedicate her life to such acts of kindness. The next day, she starts inquiring about the person who lived in her apartment decades ago from her neighbors. She finds out that his name is Dominic, but she has little luck finding the man himself. And one day her neighbor Raymond invites her in for a cup of tea. Raymond is an elderly reclusive artist. They start to have a conversation, and he gives her the correct spelling of the man that she's looking for, Dominic. And this encounter becomes the beginning of their friendship. After hearing the man's real name, she's able to locate him, and she anonymously gives him the box, and the aging man is brought to tears by his childhood memories and nostalgia. And as a result, he decides to reunite with his estranged daughter and grandson. Amelie then decides to devote her life to acts of kindness after witnessing the man's reaction, so she starts to help people, and Amelie walks in with a blind man quickly explaining to him everything she sees in vivid detail, and she helps him experience and form the details of the market, and the man soaks in everything with wonder and fascination and a smile on his face. With another scheme in her mind, Amelie goes to her father's place at night and steals his garden gnome. While carrying the garden gnome back to the subway station, she looks at a handsome man named Nino, and Nino was collecting discarded photos from the photo booth. Amelie is instantly love-struck by him, and suddenly, Nino looks up and starts running after a man, and Amelie follows after him. As he was chasing the man on his scooter, his bag falls off the scooter, and Amelie picks up the bag and takes it with her. In his bag was a photo album containing all the photos thrown away by the people at the photo booth. Next, we see Amelie at the cafe, scheming to bring together two lonely people, her hypochondriac co-workers Georgette and Joseph. Joseph is the jealous ex-lover of the other waitress, Gina. He's a regular in the cafe and sits there all day spying on Gina and mutters notes into a tape recorder of every man Gina talks to. Amelie sets them up by telling Joseph that Georgette was interested in him, and then while closing the cafe, she drops Georgette a hint that Joseph might like her. After that, Amelie was at Raymond's place and shows him the photo album. In the album, she finds reoccurring photos of a man, the same man Nino was chasing. They try to understand the mystery of why this man discards his photos all over town, and back at the cafe, Amelie's tricks were working as both Joseph and Georgette start taking interest in each other. Later, she goes to visit her father, who shows her a picture of his stolen garden gnome in Moscow, and he received this in his mail. He's very confused at seeing this photo, and Amelie tells him that maybe the garden gnome just wanted to see the world. world. On her way back on the subway, she finds a notice for a missing bag. The same bag that Nino had dropped, and Amelie decides to return it. After calling the number on the notice, Amelie finds herself at an adult store where Nino works, but he was apparently at his other job at the amusement park. So she heads over to the amusement park to give him the album personally, and at the park, she meets him but she was too shy to say anything. She then proceeds to leave him a note on his scooter giving him details of a place to meet up. Nino reaches this place she asked him to go to and follows the directions laid out by her, but again she panics and she backs out of the meeting at the last minute. And when Nino returns, he finds his bag with the photo album attached to his scooter. Amelie was keeping an eye on him and she calls the phone booth near him. On the call, Amelie tells him that she knows about the man he's chasing and asks him to turn to page 56, where she discreetly asks him if he wants to meet her. And these games played by Amelie capture Nino's attention, and now he wants to meet her. He asks his co-worker who'd met Amelie what she looks like, and she describes her as a pretty girl for her type, and his curiosity about her grows even deeper. Amelie has now tasked herself with helping her neighbor Madame Wells get over her womanizer husband who died in a tragic accident. She steals Madame Wells's letter from her husband, which is written to her decades before. And after being inspired by a newspaper article about a letter which arrived 30 years late, she decided to use those letters to reconstruct a new letter to Mrs. Wells by her husband as an apology for breaking his promise and being an unfaithful partner. While she was at the photo booth taking pictures to leave a message for Nino, Amelie comes face to face with the mystery man Nino is obsessed with. Back at the apartment, Mrs. Wells receives the letter and is brought to tears after reading it. A deep sadness is lifted off her shoulders and she's overjoyed with the news that her husband loved her after all. Meanwhile, her father receives more photos of his garden gnome traveling around the world. And later, we see Amelie's air hostess friend returning the garden gnome to her, and it turns out that Amelie stole the beloved garden gnome and gave it to her friend, who photographs it in different famous foreign locations during her flight stops. And Amelie anonymously sends the photos to her father, a scheme to push her father to use his retirement to travel, and his garden gnome is later returned to his house. At the photo booth, Nino is putting a poster to ask Amelie where to meet and when. He then proceeds to collect pieces of torn pictures which were left by Amelie to tell him where and when she wants to meet him. At the shop, he sits and puts the picture together, and Amelie had called him to the cafe where she worked. Nino was late and Amelie was starting to get worried, but to her relief, he arrives. He recognizes Amelie from the photo she left for him to find, but she's still unable to muster enough courage to talk to him, so as a result, he denies her identity. But before he leaves, Amelie hands Gina a note to slip in his pocket. He finds the note when he gets back to his work, and she asks him to meet her at a photo booth at 5 p.m. And at 5, Nino reaches the photo booth and looks around for Amelie. Amelie was already there and she watches Nino from afar, and right at that moment, Nino realizes the mystery man is in the photo booth, and as it turns out, the mystery man was just some repairman. Nino is delighted to have figured this out, and Amelie walks toward Nino, but he was gone before she got to meet him. Back at the cafe, things between Joseph and Georgette begin to sour as he becomes more and more insecure of every man Georgette talks to. Nino shows up at the cafe to meet Amelie, but he's unable to find her, and he asks Gina for help, and she tells him that she wants to talk to him privately to make sure that he's not the kind of guy that would hurt Amelie. And after speaking with Nino, Gina sees that he's a good man. However, Gina's ex-boyfriend Joseph notices the two leaving together, and Georgette becomes tired of Joseph's suspicious nature and she ends the relationship. And when Amelie returns to the cafe, she finds an irritated Joseph. And because he misunderstood things, he reveals that Gina had gone out on a date with Nino, and when Amelie hears this, she's crushed. A heartbroken Amelie goes home and bakes a cake while weeping, and she daydreams of a life with Nino. And right then, there's a knock at her door, and a man was calling out her name. And this person was apparently Nino. Amelie was still nervous and was unable to open the door, and assuming that she's not home, Nino slips in a note saying that he'll come back. And when she goes to her room, she finds a tape left for her by Raymond, and the tape encourages her to go after the man she loves or to risk eternal unhappiness. Inspired, Amelie runs to open the door and go after him, and she flings the door open and falls face to face with Nino, who was still there. Amelie brings him inside without speaking, and she starts this cute kissing game. And Nino, of course, likes this, and he kisses her back, and this results in a romantic night together and the beginning of a relationship between them. And at the end of the movie, movie, we see Dominic enjoying his life with his grandchild, and Amelie's father was also leaving to travel the world. And lastly, we see Amelie and Nino happy riding Nino's scooter together. And this is how today's movie comes to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed this recap. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and most of all, subscribe to my channel. I love you guys so much, and I promise to see you on my next recap. Bye!